Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody who's tuning in. And yeah, hopefully this is really practical for you guys. And so we'll get started here. All right. Uh-oh. There we go. So I want to talk about the power of personal projects, how an intentional personal project can fuel your future. Um, so, but first, it's always important to talk about the why. Why are you doing this? And um, I think it's because you can level up your current skills that you already have, but just hone your craft a little bit more. You can also develop new skills through this, where there's an area that you might want to, that you've thought about getting into uh, for your career. It's just a great way to have a practical um, project, a practical example to show folks later as well. And you build your portfolio with work you actually want to do. The only reason why I'm an illustrator today is because I did personal projects and I had to create a pile of work and and really hone that craft. So I have a background in art direction and design, and you can probably tell if you look at my illustration style that that's my background. Um, and so I was able to pivot later on in my career to do illustration, and that was because I had actual good examples in my portfolio from building a pile of work. And then I think, yeah, it's making work on your own terms. A lot of times if you, especially if you do client work for a living, like you're really bound to the parameters of those projects and the goals of your clients. So it's a way to like free yourself up to go, yeah, what's my voice? What do I bring to the table? A lot of times you're bending everything towards the client, which is great. Like that, I love client work. Most of the time, I love client work and helping other people with their goals. But this is like giving yourself a chance to like, well, how would I approach this fully without any other parameters, or outside parameters is probably what I should say. I think it's also helps you develop your artistic voice. I'll show some examples a little bit later where I really honed like what my passions were and how I create what I say, how I visualize things. And then I've also learned that I like writing science stories for kids, and I would have never known that had I not done a personal project. And it's a great way to market yourself, especially if you're really strategic in how you share it. As long as the project's good and it can get eyeballs, you know, um, at the end of it, um, it's a great way to have things just in your back pocket to share or be intentional. And we'll get a little into that a little bit more later. But first, I'm going to go through some examples of personal projects that have really been foundational to my career. So here we go. So our solar system was a sorry about that. Our solar system was a project that I created that was basically a website that had 22 original illustrations, and it was something that I released over, I don't know, 3 months on social media. So I learned a lot during this project because one, I was designing the website, I was illustrating, I was writing, and then I was doing the social media plan, which I will never do that amount of work again because it was just a lot. It was the first big project, personal project that I had done, but um, it's it was still just great because it did get attention later on, not right away, but later on. And I created a poster that I had for sale for about 4 years, based off of the art. And then I ran some T-shirts based off of the art off of Cotton Bureau. And I had 3 successful runs. So it's like a pre-sale site. And if you sell a certain amount, they'll actually produce and print them. And so the original site was about 6 years ago, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, it was 6 years ago. But then about a year after, I was posting all on social media, Instagram and Twitter, and the art director for Highlights found me on Twitter and messaged me and gave me a gig. So I've been working with Highlights for Children for about 5 years. If you don't know it, it's a children's magazine that, you know, is in a lot of dentists and doctors' offices. So if you, if your parents took you to the dentist or the doctor, you probably know about it. But it's a great magazine, and I would have never gotten noticed had I not done that personal project. And then about 2.5 years after that project, the creative director for Orion found me on found me on the internet, and they're a telescope company, and I own one of their telescopes, which is weird. And so it was just like a little surreal of like, I own one of their products and they're contacting me to do this children's astronomy book. And so and it was based off of my personal project and the style of space that was approachable for kids, and then it was also the credibility that I had done work for Highlights. So it was just kind of one of those compounding things. And next, now this was a project that I did probably about 3.5 years ago. So I wanted to get into the board game market. And so I created a mashup of my favorite Christmas movie, Elf, with Candyland. And it just basically follows Buddy's journey from the North Pole to New York. And I found a place online that would actually produce it. And so I ended up making 15 copies, sending it to some of the clients that I worked with that year, and then also mailed it to some board game companies. Never heard back. But then later, I think about 1.5 years ago, is when I started talking with a small board game company about producing it. We're still in the finding licensing stage, but maybe one day it'll be a real product. And then this was born out of me being completely burned out. You can tell when I'm burnt out because I love cereal mascots, and I'll just draw them because I have nowhere else to go in my mind. So I just started drawing them. But I heard some advice years ago about, like, if you're going to do fan art, put your own spin on it. Don't just copy what you're seeing. Have a concept, have something to say. Maybe it's a mashup of some sort, but something that's unique and your take on it. So the cereal is their flotation devices, and it was just kind of fun. I ended up using it for like a promo for a postcard, and then like there was a gallery show here in the Springs that I was able to just print it out big and use. And so that this has gotten some eyeballs and some attention over the years, which is great. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. But this is the next one that I've done that I've really worked on for the last 2 years. And it's bite-sized books, which are basically quick stories for children that are first on Instagram. They're like children's books for Instagram that use the 10 pages or the 10 frames on Instagram that you can use. And so I've done 6 now, and I'm about ready to release Elise and Miles Meet the Honeybees, which is super cool. But this has just been a great way to build my portfolio for children's books, and it has gotten some eyeballs and some notice from there. But here's how it would look on Instagram. I show some behind the scenes, and then I post the final on there, so you can read the entire story right from within Instagram. The text is right in there. But then I go a step further, and then I create a little mailer, a little booklet that's about 4 3/4 inches square, and it fits right in an envelope with my postcard. And then I mail it to, I've been mailing these to publishers. And so there's a little example having like what they call end pages in books. I'm mocking up at the side there, and then title page, and then just an example of a spread. So this really shows an art director that I can carry a character. I can do multiple versions of the character. I can do spreads. I can do spot illustrations. And it's really checking off all the boxes that an art director in the publishing world is looking for right there. They don't have to go outside of a postcard. So anyway, enough about that. But this actually, I actually got a book deal from a big publisher earlier this year based off of The Cereals of Summer and that they saw on Instagram, but then they saw some of the work that I've been doing with my bite-sized books, and a lot of the examples. I mean, and all the examples that they sent of what they like were from personal projects. So had I not invested the time and energy into doing this, I probably wouldn't have gotten noticed for that gig. And so that's just kind of the power that it has if you can really be intentional and hone it. So now we're going to get into some of the nuts and bolts of how to pull off a personal project. The short answer is treat this like a real project from two perspectives. One, it's important. A lot of times I didn't put as much importance in my mind into it up front, but then I started seeing that it paid off, that it was getting, people were talking about people. Who are these people that we talk about? But people would mention that in conversations when I was at events, or, I'd get messages online, and it just seemed to get more attention than some of my regular client work. And so, but it's really helped steer my career. So now I make it a priority. The second thing is treat it like a real project in all the boring steps of, and we'll get into that, of I work on developing it, I plan it, then obviously I create it, share after that. And then I think there's something about celebrating and resting that is really important. We're not machines, and we finish this and it's successful that we just finished it. But yeah, so this is a lot of stuff. A lot of times I would just, early on, I would just rush into creating, and like our solar system project would have never happened had a good friend of mine really helped me plan all the little steps along, that were needed to finish that project. And so that was a huge lesson learned from that one. So we're going to talk about my top 12 tips. So the worksheet that's coming will dive a lot deeper into this, but I just want, for time's sake, we're going to just talk about the top 12. So first and foremost, I think it's defining one market that you want to get into. And so that could be, for me, it's been, I want to get into the board game market, or as an illustrator. I want to get into the children's book world as an illustrator. That's really hard to do, but defining a market and that you want to get into. And then I think it's aligning your passions, because I think you're going to go longer. You're going to have a lot more knowledge about the topic, or, whatever that is. I mean, it could even be like a TV show or whatever. You're going to have a built-in knowledge, and it's going to allow you to like want to work on this and want to see it created in this world. And then from there, I think it's brainstorming multiple projects. I think I'm the type of person who goes into this one idea that I have, and then I want to see it and I rush in. But when I've backed away and I've thought, okay, this is the market, these are the passions, and then just jotting ideas down, sometimes that's over time. I mean, the bite-sized book idea was kind of like off and on thinking for about a year before I really developed that project. And so that's probably one of the exceptions, but take a little bit of time to think through multiple options and then compare them and see like what's sticking, what's connecting on a human level, what feels like, what feels substantial enough, not like crazy, stressful, cause you anxiety kind of stuff, but just like what feels the best, what's the best step forward. And then I also like, this is like really nerdy, but like project management stuff of like create a scope of work and then cut it in half, because so often I think I can get more done than I actually can. And I tend to be ambitious and I want to do all these different things. And man, those like 30-day projects, those 100-day projects, man, they make me itch. Like I can't imagine doing that volume of work. And some people can. Some artists are like, they can just like bust out sketches or whatever. And I'm not that way. But so like I've tried to do Inktober like 3 times and I may have like 10 pieces over 3 years. So, because I get crushed under the, excuse me, the weight of like all this stuff that I have to do. And so it's really being mindful of what do I really need, right? I think having, if you're wanting to do more logo work, 5 really good logos is going to be better than 10 or 20 logos that are going to, that you're going to freak out and then not finish, right? The fact of the matter is, you know, you get kind of crushed under the weight. And I certainly have done that in the past. So I think it's really being honest and reasonable with your time that you have and the scope of what's actually going to be effective. And then I think as much as you can, make the final product feel real. So if you can make it physical somehow, or make it a sticker, even if it's just a sticker or a little card, something that you can physically hand out, is great. And if you can't, maybe try to do some sort of mock-up where it feels really real, on the, even if people are just viewing it on screen, it feels real. So if it's a beer label, you've got the bottle and you've got your art wrapped around it. Or if it's a book cover, you've got it on a book cover. It could be a lot of different things too, like especially like in web design, you could have it like a video of a prototype or whatever. Okay, now we're kind of getting into, that's more of the developing side. This is more of the planning side. And I've cut corners in the developing side, but anytime I cut corners planning, the project never gets done because I need a lot of tools in place to make sure that I can actually get it done. So give yourself a deadline. And a lot of times it's hard making work for yourself. And it's like it's all arbitrary, right? A lot of times it's arbitrary, but it's give yourself a deadline. And like bite-sized books take me about 3 months because I'm trying to fit it into everything else that I'm doing. Maybe 4 or 5 with this last one, but give yourself a deadline. And if you can align it to some sort of other calendar of like businesses are looking for work in the beginning of January or something to trick yourself into doing it, I think is important. But it's giving yourself a deadline just so that you have an end in sight. And a lot of times I give myself a start date too, just to like mentally prep, like in a week or 2, I'm going to start this. And then I think carve out time to work on this project. And so this is extra outside of everything else that you're doing. So I think it's figuring out, are you a morning person? Do you wake up and you're peppy right away? Or are you a night owl where you're just like, grab a cup of coffee and then burn the midnight oil? Or is this something that you can do on the weekend? But I think finding ahead of time when you're going to actually work on this project, like within your week, is really important. Because when I don't plan that, I have all these thoughts and I have tasks and everything else. And if I don't carve out that time and put it physically on my calendar, the project doesn't get done. Speaking of on the calendar, this is get the whole thing on the calendar, and that's schedule each task. So I spent 12 years in the in-house corporate world as a designer and art director. We had project managers, account execs and schedulers. And this is just something I pulled directly from that world of breaking down the tasks into smallest size, especially if you're only working on it for like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours at a time. Be realistic with those tasks, pull those down, just make it into bite-sized chunks so that it feels doable. And if you're tired and worn out and you can't think about one task, you can move on and work on another task that is equally as important. So it really just helps keep a schedule for you. And then follow the schedule. I know this sounds really basic, and a lot of this is like the dumb little stuff, but I think it's important. Hold yourself accountable, follow the schedule. But the reality is life happens. Like we have rush projects at work, or we have family things that we need to take care of, and that's okay. But make sure that you take those little tasks that you have on your calendar and just push it out to what's realistic. Reschedule any of those things. And I think it really helps keep the momentum. And the longer you push things out, like, you tend to lose momentum in the project. And if that's your season of life, that's okay. But I try to get those rescheduled as quickly as possible so that I'm not, letting this project drag on forever. Sometimes you need to pull yourself together, take a page from Edna mode when that happens. So, and that's okay. We're human, and sometimes we just have to pull ourselves together and compose ourselves again. And I think invite others. This was a huge game changer for me in that this is personal. And so like a friend of mine, we talked about writing. She's a writer. We talked about writing a children's book for like, I don't know, 8 years. And so it was something that I knew she wanted to do. And so I was like, hey, would you write one of these? And, we met and she did. And it was just kind of mutually beneficial for both of us. But sometimes, you may need to pay somebody to do something and just talk about a fair rate and pay somebody to do a small task for you while you're doing that. I think also think about people that can provide feedback, think about people that can provide insight too. So if it's a new industry or market that you're into, talk to friends, talk to folks, get some insight, which may help your project together. But like, it's really fun when you're working with friends on some things and it's mutually beneficial for everybody else. Cause then it doesn't feel like you're creating alone in the dark, which is what often I feel like I'm creating. So when you can, I think it's great. And then I think we're getting into sharing. So the creation side, you're obviously going to create it. I think most of us have a lot of experience in creating the actual things that we do. But then I think when you're sharing it after you're done, think about ways, like if it's a digital, share it digitally, share it physically. So if it's digital, what are physical forms that this can take? And if it's a physical form, what are digital forms that it can take? I think it's a 1-2 punch in today's world of digital probably is going to get the most eyeballs, but like I think physical pieces have a little bit of weight, and people are going to, like, even if it's like a postcard of mine, like people look at it, they have to make the decision to throw it away as opposed to mindlessly scrolling up and just like passing it by. So I think if you can think of those two worlds, I think you're going to have a little bit more impact as you share your personal project. And I think share it directly with people. And this is like newer territory for me in the last year or two of not only am I mailing it to art directors for those bite-sized books, but I'm trying to think of other ways to share that. So I think about industry pros, think about potential clients. Some of those are the one and the same, but sometimes it's just an industry pro that may never throw you work, but you just share it anyway. And not that you're doing it for work, and then I think about special groups. So like if it's like I do space art, and there's like a lot of like Instagram pages that have space themed, and they're sharing stuff all the time. So it's stuff like that, groups like that. And I think if you think about it long enough, you'll think about other groups, or maybe you need to do a little bit of research too. Like LinkedIn is super great for like finding industry pros and other areas on a professional level. I've definitely used that to find art directors for publishers. So, and then this one seems really obvious: follow through to the finish line. And I think that's why defining your scope is so important. Is like, can you actually finish this? And I've had to drag myself to the finish line, honestly. Like there have been times where I've just hit a wall and I've just had to like drag myself. It's something that I said I was going to do. I'm going to follow through. And like half of the bite-sized books that I did were easy. And the other half, especially when I'm writing, were really hard. And there were times I'm like, why am I doing this? This is stupid. Like, you're spending all this time, no one's going to notice, blah, blah, blah. And the fact of the matter is I just needed to get to the finish line. And this last one was like probably the hardest, the Meet the Honeybees, because there's just a lot of bees in that one. There's a lot of research and story, and I was like, man, this is, my own. I'm harshest on myself a lot of times as far as like quality. And then I got to the end and I realized after some perspective, it was some of the best work that I've done. And at least in my opinion, but but I think it's just important to get yourself to the finish line. And sometimes you have to, sometimes you need to take a break. Sometimes you need to get feedback when you hit a wall. Sometimes, yeah, like you need to, do some things that help you get to the finish line. But I think once you're done, you kind of have this great sense of accomplishment, and it's super exciting when it's done to then start sharing it and following through. And I will say, if it's like sucking the life out of you and you're hating every second of it, it's okay to quit, right? Like, this is life. You're kind of putting this on yourself. But if you can, remind yourself of why you're doing and try to get to the finish line if you can. So that's more of like nuts and bolts of the process. Here's some just final thoughts on personal projects. Give yourself grace. Like I mentioned, like, gosh, life gets in it's no matter how many times I do these things, and I don't do them too often. It's like 2 or 3 times a year, maybe. And definitely have seasons of them, but give yourself grace. Life happens. Steps are going to take, especially when you're breaking into new territory and you're trying to experiment or do things, it takes longer than you think. Give yourself some grace. Know why you're doing it. Just keep going forward. Also, like, yeah, something like the whole COVID-19 stuff. Like, I was late on this last one because I was battling some anxiety of the future of like, what, it was like right at the beginning, like, what's the future going to look like? I don't know if people are going to hire illustrators anymore. So, where's work coming from? And so it's just taking a breather, taking a little bit of a break to just give myself time to compose. I think also, as much as like I try to think about getting into new markets and will people hire me if I do this, I think the fact of the matter is finishing the project and just doing it is success. And you're probably a good step ahead of peers that aren't doing anything like this. So I think the fact that you've done this, that you've invested in your career, you bet on yourself, that's successful, regardless of what happens. And something that really helped me early on is letting go of the results, right? Like, you've taken the time to do this personal project. You've been intentional with what it is. You've been intentional with sharing it. You've done your part, and just let go of the results mentally. That was really hard for me to do up front, just because I was like hoping that people would see this and, I would get results. But it's more of just like the act of creating and doing was a reward in itself. And I just, and these things always like go different ways, right? Like, that's, yeah, they always happen in different ways, but like, nothing is lost. Even if you like realize that you hate a topic or hate what you've done, you would never have gotten there if you hadn't done the work, and that'll allow you to pivot. Also, you've learned a new skill, you've bet on yourself, and I think there's something that you will always be able to take it from there, that with you to the future. So what will you create? And I've been printing a lot of school stuff off for my kids. So it's in boring black and white, just to be a little friendlier for your at-home printer. And so that's going to come in the email, the follow-up email, and it's going to outline all of those 5 steps. And there's questions there, so it should be self-explanatory as you fill it out and work on your own personal project. So thank you. Thanks for hearing me out and showing up. Love to hear if you start a personal project or adapt something that you're already doing. That would be awesome. Went a little too fast here. Anyway, that's my website and my where you can find me. I'm most active on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Dribbble, but my website has all of the social accounts that I'm on. So went a couple minutes over. Hope that was okay.
Thank you so much, Josh. This was great. Actually, I want to read you some of the comments of the people.
Oh, awesome.
I think you are going to love it. Thank you. Good advice. This was great. This was also Josh Lewis. You are totally brilliant.
I can be really dumb sometimes too, but thank you.
Love your work.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. We have one from Stephanie. Love your work. Very inspiring, from Bogota, Colombia. We have someone from
Oh, wow.
Colombia. Oh, wow. That's so smart. Love this guy's work, from Lorenzo. Wow. And they keep going. So guys, just so you know, if you move your mouse on the bottom, there is the Q&A. If you have a question for him, write them down. I'm gonna start reading some of them. We have one from Nate. When you have an ongoing project, how do you find motivation to keep going?
Yeah, when I have an ongoing project. So what I did with bite-sized books is that I brainstormed a lot of different stories and a lot of different things up front, so that I knew down the road, if I'm exhausted and I can't think, I've got some stuff in my back pocket. Also, like, I think when you're hitting a wall, sometimes you need to take a break. Like, sometimes it's okay to like take a break for a couple of weeks and then come back to it with fresh eyes. But as far as like motivation goes, I think it's remembering the why you're getting into it. Like, especially if it's like, I'm trying to break into this market and I don't have anything to show. That tends to really get me remotivated. And sometimes like I need to like stop thinking, and sometimes I need to find some inspiration too. So looking at other, if it's books, looking at other children's books just to get some fresh inspiration while I'm working. And so it's really hard because like sometimes it's hard to know why your motivation is lacking. So if you can think a little bit more about that, it really helps. But those are some of the things, like just stepping away for a little bit, either getting some fresh inspiration or feedback from friends. A lot of times with stuff that I'm already doing can be a shot in the arm to keep going.
I hope this answer to your question, Nate. One more. How often do you do personal project? Because I think personal project is something maybe you do more when you are out of school or when you don't have that much experience. But do you keep going as an adult, or how many do you do now?
Yeah, I think I view myself as like a lifelong learner. So I'm just learning in many different ways. But like, honestly, I do as little as 1 or 2 a year. Over the last 3 years, I've done 2 to 3 personal projects, and they'll last anywhere from a week to 3 months. So it's really just scaling to my season of life, scaling to what I need to get done to actually show, potential clients. So I don't know if that answers it, but it's not something that you have to do all the time. Like you're burning yourself out. Like I think you just gotta burn steady. Don't crush yourself and kill your mental health. I've definitely have done that through this. So it's being realistic.
So we have a question from Shirley. What advice would you give to current design students who also need to tackle personal projects? Aside from school projects, I hear personal projects are much more appreciating portfolio. Is that true?
I don't know how you do like school and then personal projects. Like I feel like that might be a little too much actually, because I think, well, hopefully your school projects are practical and stuff that you're building your portfolio with. So, I mean, I think if it were me, it would be more of something to consider after school. Just from a practical standpoint, I don't know. Like if I were in school, I wouldn't be doing personal projects, because hopefully the reason why I'm going to school is to learn something and build work and have a portfolio to show at the end. So
she mentioned that her question is related to time management.
Oh, time management.
Yeah, maybe find the time to manage both at the same time, I guess.
If you can,
it's kind of
hard. I think it's really hard. That's a really hard thing. And that's where I think you just have to be realistic with your time. But if you just need to like draw in a sketchbook. It's really, I'd have to like really dig into a lot more specifics there, but I think it's really hard to try to do all of that. And maybe if it's really hard because, you know, you only have so much time in the day and you only have so much energy in the day. So, you know, maybe let that speak to like, maybe this personal project, I'm not in the right season for that right now.
Okay.
That would be my advice, my dad advice.
Do you have any advice for overcoming self-doubt, especially when pivoting in a career?
Oh boy. Excuse me. Yeah, self-doubt. I think I've definitely struggled with that, especially early on. I think for me, it was just kind of a lot of times the self-doubt is coming from because I'm comparing myself too much to other people. And I think when I kind of missed the time where I was like super excited about design up front or super excited about illustration. I was new. No one expected me to be any good and I wasn't any good. And, you know, it was this, I felt like I can experiment, but a lot of times, especially with early on with these personal projects, like I had major self-doubt and major, like told myself I couldn't do this. And so by treating this like a real project, I gained some objectivity a little bit to where I'm like, I'm going to at least focus on this area to get better in. And then I think that's part of just letting go of the results of like, you just kind of be playful, have some experiment, you know, be experimental. And I think with the self-doubt is like, gosh, I'm sure there's like some deep psychological stuff there too. That's not going to just go away overnight. But I think when I've tried to gain a little bit of objectivity with these projects, it's really helped me follow the process and the project, and it's helped me get through even through self-doubt. And I think that's too, like inviting others and sharing that with friends and getting advice from other people to really help to gain some confidence. I don't know if that's helpful, but I live with self-doubt all the time, but it's trying to trick myself to pull something like this off.
We have one more from Amanda. Hi, Josh. I love that you celebrate when this project completed. What does that look like? And how do you stay motivated when responses to the work are sometimes years out?
Yeah. So celebrating, like, and I think that's part of, for me, just like sharing it on social media is part of the celebration. But like, I'll take those books and pass stuff out. Sometimes I give myself permission to do something that I'd never do. Like I love going to antique stores and poking around for hours. It drives my wife and kids nuts. So it's like something that I allow myself to do. I'm not motivated by like rewards. I'm more motivated by meaning. And so if I can like make a sticker of something that I've created and pass that out, that feels like a celebration of, you know, of the work. But sometimes it's just giving yourself permission to do something that you wouldn't normally give yourself permission to do. And then what was the second part? Was it how do you keep yourself motivated if it's years out?
Yes, how do you stay motivated when responses to the work are sometimes years out?
Yeah, and I think that's what I've learned. Like I kind of go in knowing that these have the potential to be powerful when done right. I don't always do them right, but I think that's part of just letting go of the results and not really expecting anything from it, but knowing that the more you do this type of stuff, the more chance it has. And it's kind of like the real boring like part of everyday life. It's like, I know something's going to happen. I don't know what exactly. And if it doesn't, that's okay. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it to ultimately grow and expand as an artist. And hopefully that makes me more marketable over time. So it's always interesting. Like, I mean, I had somebody license my space art from like 6 years ago this past December. And I'm like, well, that was random. So, you know, so these things tend to pop up randomly. And the more you do it, the more you get a sense of, I'm not doing this exactly to get work, but it does happen. Um, and so just kind of adjusting your expectations really helps. And then it just frees you up to be excited about, well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing that I can work on, and think about that, and getting more caught up in what the cool possibilities that you could create. So that certainly helps me keep going over time, but not really having solid expectations that this one thing's going to do it all for me. It typically doesn't, and sometimes it does take years. So
Talking about that, there is one question from Sam. Do you have a bucket of ideas when deciding on personal project, or do you brainstorm when you decide to take one on?
yeah, I think there's yeah, I don't, sometimes I write them down, sometimes I don't, but like I think of different ideas a lot, and it's really um it's definitely something. Having more ideas is better because then you can evaluate them against each other. So I say do that as much as you can, because it's like, yeah, that might not work as well as I think, this one feels, you know, more real, or it has more potential to get eyeballs, it's more human or whatever. So yeah, definitely I have a backlog. I have a backlog of story ideas for bite-sized books to keep going, so that when it's time for me to pick it up again, I'm looking at other things. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, as much as you can do it.
One question from Stephanie. What do you think children would like to see concerning design and illustration after the COVID situation?
Man, I think it's more like after and during. I mean, I think yeah, that's a tough one to crack. But I think it's um yeah, I think there's a lot of mental health stuff going on just in general, just as far as like being able to manage disappointment, being able to manage anxiety and some of that. And I just think that's ongoing for this generation anyway. But I think this is kind of accelerating some of that. And I think anything with hope at this point, like I think there was this like, just in general in entertainment, can we do a dark and gritty version? And I think of whatever, and I think that's too easy. But I think anything that's hopeful and, you know, captures the hopefulness of the human spirit just on a broader way, I think is more important. Whether you're an adult or children, it's more important now than ever to have that hope for the future. Not blind hope, but hope for the future in real practical ways. So I hope that answers it. I'm certainly not an expert in that, but I think if we can spread a lot of hope right now, I think is really good.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic right now.
Yeah.
Uh, one more question from Shirley. Can you please share what your daily work schedule is like? Do you still run by the regular office hours? That's how I used to do it, so there will be a balance between work and everything else. Sleep is good for sure.
Yes. Sleep is good. I tend to I have a little bit more time in between projects to work on personal stuff. So I'm more of a tackle it in the morning type of person. And so it's really following your rhythm of energy. And so some people get energized at night. That's not me. I'm usually completely gone by 10 p.m. So I think for me, I try to keep regular office hours just because my wife has a job and my kids, had school, and just to kind of create a sense of normalcy. And when I don't have a set time frame, I tend to like drift into like oblivion of like, what's the day, what's the time? And so it just helps me to have office hours. So I start usually between 7 and 8 a.m. And try to tackle some sort of personal thing first when I'm doing personal work. Or sometimes I do it in the afternoon if like a client has a hot project and I have to hit a specific deadline. I'll tackle that first. But yeah, I think keeping office hours is great. But I've been going, like, one of the cool things about this whole COVID thing is like, my oldest son, we've been walking every day for like an hour just to like get us both outside and get some fresh air. And that's been like, I've been taking longer lunch breaks lately, which has been super helpful to where I feel like I hit the afternoon. So for me, it's just experimenting with what your body rhythms are and learning that over time. And this is something I've been doing for, I don't know, a decade of just trying to figure out. So it's something you kind of adapt to. But I do think office hours are really important as far as keeping some sanity.
Thank you, Josh. We had a lot of questions this morning.
Oh,
So
wow.
guys, we don't want to steal your time anymore, but we are going to move the conversation on our Slack channel. So if you want to talk to Josh, he's going to be there for a little bit, so you can keep asking him anything you want. Or we are going to send a recap email, so you have his email, contact, social media, so you can write him directly as well. Also, we create a survey and we just post the link on the chat. If you have 1 minute or two, we would appreciate you can fill it up and like give us some feedback. If you like it, if you have suggestions how we can improve it for our community, or if you know any other speakers you would like for us to contact, let us know. And said that, I think this was great. I really enjoy it, and I have some personal project myself. Now I'm like almost on the finish line, so hopefully I can get some.
That's good. Awesome.
So thank you so much again, and guys, thank you so much. You have been great. A lot of people, a lot of questions, and we'll see you next Thursday with Mona Lucero talking about fashion. But for now, thank you, Josh, and thanks everyone.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.